won't. Capulin, Capulin, choke cherry. Anyway, I threw my hat in the ring to be considered one of the several artists. You can see beautiful works by other artists who have been in residence here. And I've realized over the years it's good, before I show you what I've been doing in process after being here. Tomorrow will be 3 weeks. What I'm doing and what this is now leading to in larger works in the next 2 weeks, I thought it would be best to introduce myself briefly. So this is basically 20 to 22 quick PowerPoint images. And how do I get from here? In high school, I studied with a professional working artist doing landscapes. How did I get from there to, this is at the University of Wyoming Art Museum, a large public sculpture. How do these things tie in? The 2 or 3 simple and great images which gained access to my heart. Number 1, the horizon line, in particular of the landscape. And number 2, the human condition, but in particular the individual. When my parents moved us back to Florida in my high school years, I fell in love with the vast ocean, this horizon line, this deep, deep space. When I moved out west in 1974, I found the same ocean, but it was an ocean of land. And that same huge expanse. I moved to the eastern high plains when I came out west here. I have made myself, throughout my whole life, have the opportunities to constantly put myself in my favorite places and to make newer discoveries by having my feet on the ground, actually being there. And that's where this residency, the last 2.5 weeks, has been incredible. This is me pictured in the waterfall at Capitol Reef National Monument. This is 1.5 years after they had just opened. And I have to say, thank you, rangers. The ranger, after I bicycled across the first 3 days of this bicycle trip in southeastern Utah, saw me chain my bike to the guardrail, and the ranger said, "You've been in that waterfall for 6 hours straight." About 8 years ago, I took a class, again, a class where you learn with your feet on the ground by working with geologists, historian, and anthropologists going into the Grand Canyon. The second image which gained access to my heart is the individual, unique individuals in our culture. And let me tell you, sitting on the trail side, I have found some very unique individuals coming to this place. Secondly, with that, I was a lounge musician, a lounge lizard, affectionately, and I learned to take art and put it in the public. So if you're saying, Chuck, in just a couple of brief words, what do you do? I'm a sculptor, I'm a muralist, I'm a draftsman, I do performance art, and I make sound installations.
And you're a husband.
And a husband, and a father, and a grandfather. Thank you. My lovely wife, Evelyn. And so if I can sum it up, I deal with connections, and in particular, connections. For instance, this is a metal ramp moving up on the right, earth on the left. I frame what is already there. And so I was interested in the individual space here. Incidentally, that was put up 6 months before the World Trade Center, pictured in the back, came down. Or I frame, again, the way you see pictorial framers, the way I was raised doing it, an event. This one in particular with one of the ultimate connections in life, the steeple. It doesn't matter what the religious institution is, connecting the earth with whatever is up there. It was struck by lightning, and the scaffolding put up to rebuild it. I found that interesting for historical, architectural, and symbolic reasons. I was working as a graduate student doing lots of flat two-dimensional paintings. But at the same time, I was working in factories, I was working in things that affected my art, and so I said, how come I'm separating the three-dimensional real world? So I decided to use the same imagery. This is a recent drawing, 2 feet by 2 feet, in which I use that sensibility. I not only use images, but I like to say I paint with materials. I have not only nuts and bolts, part of the connective points of our everyday world, but I have layers. We look through layers. Through our glasses, through windshields, through screens. And so I try to use that sensibility in my contemporary works. But full circle, I keep looping back to what I love. And that's a horizon line in nature, and to see the details. So as we look at this, the details I learned in life and the sensibility came from my real life jobs, because I made a decision early on. I do not want to rely solely on the market to sell my art. I can develop a market to fit my art rather than make art to fit a market. So I had jobs working in scrap yards in huge steel factories, building 80-foot diameter steel containers, and working in welding shops, building and constructing billboards. Even being a garbage collector, I learned every situation was a creative opportunity. I learned that more about people being a garbage collector, and realized as the third week as I'm loading stuff in, I, 200 years from now, would be called an anthropologist. And so, and even learning to be a grunt carpenter and a framer, all of this rolled into my studio sensibility. And wonderfully, on this crew, I ended up working with another inventive, creative person, the author, I mentioned the other day, Kelly, Gary Parson, who wrote Hatchet and Winter Song. He's the largest selling children's author in the late 20th century. He and I became the dearest of friends, where we spent so much time together talking about our lives. And then I started focusing in, and this is leading to how I come here. A pencil in my hand and a brush. I learned I don't need to depend on other institutions, other businesses for a job. So I learned to hand litter trucks, hand litter and pictorial billboards and build them. I started working for the contract for the concert promoter, getting backstage, talking to the icons, Stevie Ray Vaughan, B.B. King, the Grateful Dead. I mean, because I'm doing signs, graphics, and murals for the concert promoter. But most interestingly, I got to work as a contract muralist and illustrator at the Museum of Natural History. Full circle back again to one or two of those great images which first gained access to my heart. I got to work with world-renowned paleontologists, naturalists. It really refocused me into what imagery I wanted to use and what sensibilities I developed. So this is one of my fine arts murals, focusing in, again, as one starts to do in our culture. Dealing with time, interested in the dispersion of not only this great horizon that we all share, but we have a very narrow time of life that we each share. And so I would take ice and take my drawings, lay them over. And this particular piece was at one of the ultimate connections in the Denver region. The Cherry Creek came into the Platte River, and it was Confluence Park, which is where Denver originally started. And I took one of my drawings, laid it over, and enlarged it, the abstracted ones, with all of the landmark places in it of ice blocks and tethered lines 400 feet long, with an audience on the several bridges that were ongoing, And then as people sat watching this work slowly melt into the river, the Denver Concert Band was playing music on the embankment for me. That's the typical type of approach I've taken. One of my favorite exhibits, and we're about to finish up here, is where does the definition of art begin and leave off? Fashion, architecture, literature, poetry, music. Well, the culinary arts, this was an exhibit in New York City where they selected an artist from somewhere in the United States, and then somewhere in the world they selected a chef. They flew this chef in from Paris, and he designed a meal similar to my artwork. They had big blown up photographs, this big, of my work in the kitchen for the art opening. And to give you an idea, I was using gestural marks, which if you look up close, you see I still use. That's a lobster consomme with caviar in it, and then there's a little bolt there, which was actually a mushroom. It was so interesting dealing with that. As a teacher, I believed in teaching by doing. And so this is the Pueblo levee, in which I had students deal with developing, like what I'm doing with the second body of work here at Capulin, this place, the volcano, developed the concept. This team developed the concept, then they developed the design, and then I helped them implement painting this 70-foot by 90-foot mural on the Pueblo levee. But the biggest thing that has occurred in my life in the last 25 years basically is that my lovely wife, Evelyn, and our 3 kids, Celia, Colin, and Devin, and I purchased 35 rural properties, 35 rural acres in southern Colorado, which is now 115 acres. And it brought me full circle back 25 years ago to why I came out west. My dad said, "You're moving from Michigan, quitting a college teaching job to do what?" And I said, "I'm going to move out west." And he said, "Why?" "I love the horizon." And he said, "Do you have a job?" "No." "Do you know anyone?" "No." "Do you have a place to live?" "No." But I wanted to be here. This place brought me full circle back. So our family designed and hand built, other than the concrete foundation, a cabin, 1,100 square foot adobe steel and glass cabin that is now my drawing studio. And I wonderfully use this as the source of inspiration, moving more and more to drawing. And that came from, again, sitting on the grounds back in 2010 after I had 2 heart attacks in a 10-day time period. And I wasn't allowed to pick up heavy tools or anything. And I had a real problem. How am I going to express myself? The problem became an opportunity, became a challenge, but ultimately became a gift in which I just sat and drew, and I recircled back to what I love most, drawing. I don't know what happened to this image, forget that. The sculpture I started out with, molto orlando, a musical term, basically frames what is already there. That's the base of the head trail, the trailhead of the Taos Trail on our property. And to have artworks that come from a place, inspired by a place, and then I end up working with putting them back on that place. Is I have 55 sculptures up on the property. During COVID, to bring us up to the present, this was part of my presentation here to the staff. And one of the reasons I applied for the residency here was in the application I read that the staff, not some imported juror, but the actual feet on the ground, I keep using that term, staff, helped make the selection of what artists they wanted. And so during COVID, when we had to stay at home, my wife said, "Don't stay at home." So I would take the car and I went to my favorite place, the Eastern High Plains, and I would spend a day drawing. And I eventually found that after the first 10-day trips doing that over a 6-month time period, then coming back to the studio making 2-foot by 6-foot works, I then found that I wanted to get further on the high plains and find new unknown places, and I would get lost. And that's what I've been doing here. I've been encountering new things. So this was my studio. We can probably leave it on. This was my studio during the end of COVID, and this was part of my slide presentation images that I sit here saying, I want to sit outside. I want to look at the place. I want to do side observation drawings. Don't leave. And so daily, I've been taking blank post office postcards here, and I've been doing studies. I've been doing drawings. There's a new book out on my art by Leaping Man Publishing, and the author has a whole section on the back called Public Art. But instead of the big sculptural pieces in Chicago or New York or Dallas or wherever, he was more interested in the fact that these are public. So many people see these. I start with this on a regular basis. If I'm not able to get out in the country, I always carry a little sketchbook with me. So this is, I don't know if someone's sitting for 30 seconds or 30 minutes. So this was in my dentist office 2.5 weeks ago, and a woman was sitting there, and I got about 2 minutes of her posing, and she never knew it. I draw every day. Some people pray, some people meditate, yoga, exercise, jog. I draw every day. And so in doing that, doing these postcard sketches, I have found different sites here that really started resonating with me. And I decided to, using the theme, I like to give the analogy, that great theme, da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, by Beethoven. So many variations on that show up in earlier works, smaller works, before the great symphonic works. So I've been selecting the exact same spot, different days, and you're welcome to come up and look at all of these later. Different weather conditions, and I know a day when you were driving by the other day, you saw me drawing. Even I'm aware of the animals that come out that time of the evening, as opposed to the other morning. I was up pre-dawn, sat up there, and as the sun was coming up, I started doing a drawing. In those studies, I also have to admit, I was blown away by the color here the first 4 days, but I found the sculptor in me was more interested in the land form, so I've mostly stuck to black and white. And these are hard to see in this light, so I've been doing hand coloring in the same aesthetic of black and white hand-colored photographs from the mid-50s, in which I love the warmth or the coolness of the colors, but I wanted to maintain the physicality of all of the landforms. Let me check my notes here. Let's see, pedestal. Okay. From there, I started doing singular, longer studies where I would spend a couple of days. So these are 3 particular views in which, much like the 4 postcards that are listed out there, at Nico's suggestion, I took whatever the road was, Johnson Pass, and took a northern view, the eastern view, etc. But in doing these studies, I started noticing, rather than north, south, east, and west, there is a triangular theme that was occurring, and there were harmonies, and there were all of these things occurring in this, let's see, There it is. So I sat up in the parking area on the rim and found that there were three distinct areas that really interested me. The three comes from the fact that even the shape of the volcano is triangular, a point of three. And I started thinking back to my graduate school days. I would work all night, and when dawn started occurring, before the sun actually rose, I would listen to Eric Satie's three variations on a melodic theme. I found this a very interesting opportunity to look at the three sites. One of my favorite readings is a lot of works by Joseph Campbell, and he writes that art can not only give meaning to life, but it can also help one experience life. For me to sit and spend hours looking at this, and this is hard to do upside down, and then begin to see harmonies. It's like two sets of hands that are echoing one another. And so I would see, for instance, a dark crest here, and then it's repeated here, then it's repeated there, then it's repeated there. And there would be those movements. There was contrast. So many of the postcards, if you look, are a deep, deep, expansive distance, and then other times an object, a tree or a rock, very, very close. The contrast of the dark and light. I found that the ripples that come from the lava that was flowing, absolutely inspirational. The circular forms came from the idea that I've been journaling on each of a separate little drawing pad. Each time I'm out drawing any one of these or the postcards, and I want to know where I am. And so I find it interesting that a compass helps you orient not only what you're looking at, but where you are. And ultimately, that's my goal in life. If I can have any of you look at my artwork and become more aware of where you're standing and the time and place that you occupy, I've done my job. So art, much like religion, can help us find a way. And so I found this little inexpensive compass interesting, that repeated circular form, focusing in on a particular area. So this is representative of more of my finished studio works, and it's hard to see in this light, but to give you an idea, I was interested that the quote of the day talks about taking what is in nature and then imaginatively, what do we do with that to understand it more. So number one, I loved it, Kelly, when you came over and saw this in process. It picked up that I'm interested in an aerial perspective. Birds not only flying over top and casting shadows, but yesterday I was up on the ridge, drawing on the rim, and birds were flying below me. That elevated view becomes very interesting. Secondly, the concentric rings here, like dropping a pebble into time, and this is the biggest focus, and then it moves outward. Thirdly, we've got that triangulation and these 3 points. And I remember asking, I think it was Rachel or Robert, but the Rangers have been incredibly informative. The idea of what are these notches in the stumps that are all around. And it was reaffirmed this morning in our walk at sunrise. The chainsaw, when they cut the trees to clear the trail, cut these notches so that it gathers water and it impedes any additional growth and helps it to rot. As we look at this, I then found the ripples moving out, much like when the tide goes out on the ocean, and you see basically the sand, the ripples. the biggest revelation here has been, it hasn't been the volcano, it's been the vistas of the volcano that allow us to look from a different perspective that we normally don't have. As we're looking at this, I also chose a view that isn't normally seen, and that's the northwestern view of this, as opposed to a lot of the postcards and images you see are what the general public more often come in and see. Repeating this triangular form, but again, the Sierra, Grand Sierra, being stretched out. I just love it. And then the emptiness between the expansive horizon, where when does, looking east, when does that horizon line physically stop and the sky begin? There's a softness, and again, we're back to the echoes that visually just, you don't know when that sound is gone. And then as I was drawing, I began to realize a couple of the postcards in black and white had the clouds hovering on the horizon late in the day, and the silhouette of those was kind of a replica, a repetition of a lot of the distant tree forms that develop this beautiful fabric on top of this massive landform. And then finally, the unknown. We still don't know if this thing's coming back, and if so, when, and what it will be. And so I allude to it disappearing. And it is entitled Capulin Breathes. That came from one of my very valued morning conversations with the rangers each morning when I come in to put the postcard and the quote up. And Nico said, when I give the sunrise hikes and you sit there, it's like the volcano is waking up and you can feel it starting to breathe. And so this is more what I'm going to be doing on a more horizontal, but 4 foot, 6 foot, and 8 foot scale in the next 2 weeks I'm here, supplementing and using all of this information that I've gathered. And so that's my presentation. Yeah.